Okay, Carles, big thanks for agreeing to sponsor this and organize this with us, and Mikko, big thanks for obviously being the content here. Vendep is a pre-A investor hailing out of Helsinki, invested in the Nordics and Baltics. We are a team of 7 with 21 companies, 2 funds, and Xolo is one of the companies we've invested, and Mikko works for Xolo. But we also have 2 companies with Carles and Nauta, Happy Signals and Apollo, and it's been really great working with you guys. Carles.
Thanks, Sakari. Thanks a lot for all this. For those that don't know us a lot, we are a pan-European early stage B2B software investor. So we are mainly present in Seed Plus Series A, that's our sweet spot. We are multi-location. So we are based in London, where I'm speaking from, lockdown at the office. We are also in Barcelona and in Berlin. So we have raised 5 funds together as a team. We are now managing a little bit more than $500 million. And we have invested in 60 companies. As Sakari was saying, we have already 2 co-investments with you guys, so we are very, very pleased. And we have actually 3 in the Nordics. The rest of our geographies are usually around our hubs. So the UK, Germany, and Spain. Some of our companies there, you may know, Brown, which one I hold it, Smart, which is also in Helsinki and in Central.
So Mikko, let's do your intro, just before your session. You have such an interesting background that I actually want to kick it off to you. But me and Carlos, we wanted to do a quick introduction to pricing. And when we thought about this with Nauta, pricing is really, to me, is a key revelation or monetization. So I think this was SaaS talk in 2018, where I really got what monetization is. And it is one of those tools that can really make a difference in your SaaS business. It affects all of the key variables. Pricing is really an atomic bomb. You can destroy your company and you can make your company very large. It can change your market to a tiny market. It can make your market huge. But it's not just that single price. It's pricing, it's monetization, and it's much more complex. And that's what we want to kind of show to you today.
Yeah, one key element is who is deciding on pricing, right? I mean, this is such a big effort that the issue here sometimes is that you do it once and then you forget about it for a long time. And actually, it shouldn't be like that, okay? So you should be reviewing pricing a couple of times a year. And actually, it should be a multidisciplinary decision. So some examples, we view, of course, management and finance, but also sales, but not only sales, marketing and product have to be there. And this is an interactive discussion. It has to say that it also requires many times external support. There are great specialists out there that can help that effort. And we as VCs have to be on top of it. So it is a collective effort. Guys, I'm sure that you know the theory, okay? And the theory is always easy. The problem comes when you put in practice. 3 main views on how to approach that. 2 that we don't like or support a lot. The old traditional one, which is cost plus. You know what it costs you to do something. You know the overheads you want to put on top, and then you want to have some profit. This is too financial. Then you have the competitive analysis, which needs a very thorough effort of knowing exactly what's going on, intelligence around competition. The problem there is having real-time information. There are companies that only do that. Okay, so that exists. Actually, we have one company in our portfolio, Blackbird, who does that. Okay, so we'll tell you exactly what everyone does in real time. But then the real one we support is value based. Here the issue is that you need it's ROI based. So you have to have a lot of direct feedback that you trust from your customers. And then there's a big question mark around attribution. Okay, so where do you actually put the value on the feedback got from the market? But this is the one that really we should be addressing.
And then, if we look at the VC-backed companies, So you started early stages, and it's probably in most cases competitor-based pricing. You look at pricing pages and you price your product similarly or slightly over, slightly under. You go to the market and start getting your customers. And at that point, you start really figuring out what your ICP, your ideal customer profile is. And you want to understand the profile so well that you can actually price for value. And this could be that, you know, you use many pricing methods. You could use a cost-based method for this space, but your primary method is to use value-based pricing. And us as investors, we always want to see this. We want to see you as a category leader possibility and grow the market, but we don't want you to do it at the cost of not getting value. So growing with a price that puts you in a category where you can't really get out and you can't come up as a category leader because you're not making enough money. So I think proving post-seed to us, for instance, as a pre-A investor, that you can price your value is a key point when you're pitching to a VC. Anything, Karas, you want to comment here?
So, I mean, then a key subject here is what is a value metric? How do you describe that? The first thing is simplicity. Okay, so the same way that we as VCs always say, if entrepreneurs are not able to put very quickly a value proposition and we understand it very quickly, then we always doubt that customers of that company are going to understand that value proposition. So pricing is exactly the same, but it's even more sensitive. So it has to be very simple. Don't overcomplicate it. It has to correlate with the amount of value that the customer gets. So a lot of customer feedback there is needed, sometimes a lot of iteration, but then stick to simplicity to that. And it really has to align to what the customer really wants, which is usually predictability.
A lot of you have done this, obviously, for a number of years or many times. I think just a couple of words of warning. You know, the most common value metric is per seat or something, a proxy of that. And you have to be aware that although this is tempting, it can lead you to price for a single sale. In some niche markets, let's say you are doing, and I mean, this is not against contract management, but I've been in the contract management business, you know, doing per seat pricing might not get you the value because there are so few people in most companies that do contract management. Instead, pricing for value might get you 10 times or 15 times or 20 times that, and figuring out what the value metric in that company is. And that's the difficult thing. But be aware of the temptation of per seat pricing and the danger for pricing only for a single sale. And Karas, I mean, you know, I just commented to you that I like to look at deals where, you know, they are making 10K or more in ARR from that priced sale. And that's because I feel that the entrepreneurs have, you know, more chances of making mistakes, learning and figuring out. Whereas, you know, if you have a low touch or no touch model and you get, say, less than 2K, if you miss a few of your first, you know, marketing tries or do it wrong, you lose your money, you can't raise any money, and you're in the trap of trying to get out, grow your sales without capital, and you can't get proof for VCs. So I think in most cases, I have an easier time looking at you know, teams that have over 10K of ARR.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's from a VC perspective, it may be also for us a lot easier to digest certain propositions. I think it depends also a lot on the customer that you're addressing, right? And we as B2B sole investors, we have companies that we tend to call them like elephant hunters, and these are those that you're mentioning, maybe something bigger. But we also have companies that are addressing the SMBs, the long tail, and which those guys don't have access to the market, and that's why our startups are addressing those markets. And there you find very small ACVs. Okay, so that's also interesting to us. But it's true, you're right. Then you have to put churn into perspective, and it becomes a little bit more difficult to see a predictable traction.
Yeah, and most companies then anyway after Series B and so on, they all sell to enterprise, at least most of them. So they get to the big segment. So Carlos and myself, we don't want to present any tools to you. You know, there are simple tools like this, for instance, saying that a high value but low popular, very unpopular feature should be moved to all plans so that you could monetize it there. But these types of frameworks are for board discussions. When you get to actually doing pricing, you need a team and you need somebody to lead that team. And Mikko is here for that and telling a story how he's worked on pricing several times already. So not doing frameworks for you guys, but giving you Mikko. Mikko, I'd like you to introduce yourself because you have such an interesting background, and just kick off the first section. And please send your questions to the Q&A tab. I can't follow the chat. The chat is full of other things. So the Q&A tab is for me and Carlos. We'll pick the questions from there.
Sure. Thank you, Sakari. So yeah, about my background. So currently I'm working as the Chief Product Officer at Xolo, where we are building a new form of entrepreneurship. And actually, my first project when I joined roughly a year ago was to start work on the pricing. So, and I'll cover that project actually as a case study now going forward. And my aim would be to show in a very practical way how we did it. So there's less theory and more practice in this section. Prior to Xolo, I was a co-founder and also running the product in a Finnish startup called Holvi, where we were building basically probably the first SME neobank in Europe. And we were in many ways pioneering that space. And at that project also and that company, pricing was a very central thing. And we actually did a couple of pricing projects. We were also working with consultancy called Simon and Kucher to develop our pricing there. And a lot of the tricks of the trade, if I would put it this way, have been learned also during that time. And I have a design background myself. I actually graduated as an architect originally, and I've been working in different fields of design. And I'll actually cover after this case study also a couple of the design aspects that are related to pricing. Let's kick it off. So starting from the Xolo pricing. So we're talking about the beginning of 2020 when we kicked off this project. And the background for this was that there had been no changes in pricing in several years in the company. But during those years, actually the product had developed further, and we saw that we were actually providing much more value to the customers than back in the day. And we saw an opportunity that there would be a way to work on the pricing during that time. And we set two goals during in that project. So one was to increase average revenue per user by 15%, which is an ambitious goal. Mm-hmm. And then also bring pricing to the toolkit. So basically actually work on the pricing, probably not on a daily basis, but as it was mentioned also in the previous slides, pricing should be revisited once or twice per year, and I see it in a similar fashion. And I can also reveal the results right away of this project. So we exceeded the goals. So we got actually our ARPU increased more than 15%. There was no significant change in churn. And bringing pricing to the toolkit. So we've done 3 rounds of smaller iterations on the pricing after that launch. So how we did it from a practical perspective. So as mentioned, I'm not gonna dive too deep into the theory of this. I'm just gonna show what we did. But if you're interested in the theory, I suggest Monetizing Innovation as the go-to book where you actually can find very good sort of description of the theory of pricing and also very practical examples on what you can and should do in developing pricing. So this is also a book that I've been sort of using multiple times when deciding how to go forward. But here's an outline of the project plan. So we spent roughly 2 months in the research phase. This wasn't a full-time job for anyone, so I would say that maybe it was 1.5 person's time spent on research. And then 1 month of development, which was mostly getting the technical capabilities to support the pricing. Plus, of course, we needed to update our website, for example, and communications. And the research phase I'll dive into in this presentation. So it goes in 3 stages: identifying the value drivers first, then putting those value drivers into order, so finding the most and least value drivers from a customer perspective, and then after that measuring the willingness to pay. So let's start by identifying the value drivers. And what we did for this was we started to conduct interviews with our customers. And the reason I put the email that we used for inviting customers to these interviews is that also this phase has to be carefully designed. And we wanted to get a lot of customers, also a little bit the passive ones, to these interviews. And our goal was to get 50 interviews done. So we decided to go forward by putting one of the founders of the company as the face of this project. So we basically offered a 30-minute chat with one of the founders of the company. And this worked well for us. And I would say that also, just from a personal perspective, I've done a lot of trial and error on this phase as well. And usually the incentive for the customer has to be big enough that they go forward with the interview. So in the next phase, we started to actually do the interviews. The interviews were a little bit shorter than we originally anticipated. So there were roughly 15 to 20 minutes per interview. And here, the main goal was to surface what the customers actually value in our offering. And this is actually quite a difficult task, because you can think about it for yourself as well, that, I don't know, you might have a cafe nearby where you like to go to have an espresso. So what are the things actually that you value about it? So is it the price? Is it the quality of the coffee? Is it the fact that it's nearby, or the atmosphere? And usually for the customers also, these are not really top of mind. What are the things that they actually value in your offering? And the goal here is from the interviews to actually try to surface as much as possible of the things that they value. And here the key is to use open-ended questions and try not to guide the customer's thinkings to any direction, but try to get as much as possible of them to talk about what they actually value. And you can see some of the questions, so actually those were the questions that we used on the right-hand side. So they're open-ended: why, what kind of questions. So what do you get from our service? What's missing from the service? Why did you decide to go with us? And did you look for alternatives? And what we did with the interviews is that we did a full transcription of these. So everything was converted into text format. And this was used then in the next phase. And from the texts, so we did, as mentioned, roughly 50 interviews, all transcribed. So we had, I think, 75 pages of text from the interviews after that. And then we started to extract things that were recurring in these interviews, things that people mentioned over and over again. And there's just one quote which can give you a little bit of indication that what kind of things you might get out of these. So this is directly from one customer. saying that already now the pricing is rather low compared to what the service offers. There could be different tiers of support. So this might be one idea that you can use already in your pricing planning. And through these interviews, we identified 26 value drivers, 26 things that customers valued in our service. So that's already fine that you have identified 26 things, but the next thing is to put those into order from the most valued and least valued. And in the next phase, we again sent them an email and invited them to a survey. And again, I put the email here because I see that it is a key tool in this process. And here you can see, for example, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you can see, for example, that we make the customer feel special. So you've been selected to participate in the Xolo feature survey. Obviously, the customers are special, so no doubt about that. Then also we create a sense of urgency. So the survey is available during the next 7 days. And then we are also managing the expectations. Completing the survey will take only 5 minutes of your time. And again, this was a pretty effective mail, and we got the amount of answers that we wanted pretty fast, actually, from this one. So what was actually in the survey? So we were using a technique called max diff, and if you think about it, that it doesn't really work that we would give the customer a list of 26 value drivers and they would need to put those in order. Nobody could do that, so it's an impossible task. So the max diff is designed to actually help out the customers in putting their preferences in order. And how it works in practice is, you can see from the right-hand side here that there's a set of 5 different value drivers, and the only thing the customer has to do is to select the most important for them and the least important for them. It's pretty straightforward. And there's 12 sets of these questions. And after enough of customers has answered this, you start to get statistically significant amount of answers, and you can actually start to put these into order. And we were using a tool called Sawtooth software for max diff. There are other providers as well. This provider was pretty okay. It's not state of the art, but it got the job done. So how does it look like then? What do you get out of it? So the item numbers here are the 26 value drivers that we identified. And you get this kind of a chart out of it. So you get the amount of times that this value driver has been selected best, and also the amount of times that it has been selected worst. Okay, I'll go back. Or maybe I won't. But anyway, so the idea is that you basically get a list of the value drivers, and there you can see which ones are the ones that customers value. And in the previous slide, there was also the one that, in our case, customers were selecting the least valued driver for them. And that was using Xolo in my native language. So this was something that we sort of decided not to prioritize at that point. And then on this slide, this is also coming directly from the tool. So there's also a ready-made segmentation that can be done for these value drivers. So the tool will try to find different customer segments out of the data. And this, I would say that is interesting, probably, but in our case, it wasn't that valuable. But it might give you some ideas on how to actually build those pricing packages. And this is obviously the end goal, what you aim to do. But you can get some indication also from the tool. So segmentation was basically done at this point. And
I might. Sorry. Can you get the next slide, or did I do something here?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes,
good.
I can. Or yes.
Great.
All right. So the next one, next phase is testing the willingness to pay. So now that we have identified the value drivers through the interviews, we put them in order, so we know which are the ones that customers value most and least. And we have a rough segmentation also of the buyer personas. So then we start to test the willingness to pay. And how we did it is that this might be a little bit unorthodox method, but what we did was that we actually split our offering into 5 imaginary products. There you can see one, and the one product was, for example, expense management tool that scans your receipts and extracts your data for your bookkeeping. And we were using okay, I'll try to go back. Yeah, so we were using a tool called Usability Hub for this. It's actually not intended for this use at all, but it gives also a possibility to find the segments that you're looking for. And after this, we asked 3 questions. So what would be an acceptable price for this service? What would be an expensive price for this service? And what would be a prohibitively expensive price for this service? And we asked all of these 3 questions out of these 5 categories that we had created. So what you get out of that is this kind of an lane of different prices, where you can see where you have the prohibitively expensive price, where the expensive price is, and the affordable price. And where we targeted our pricing was pretty close to the expensive price here. And we used the prohibitively expensive price as our anchor. And I'll actually go in the design section a little bit deeper on what this anchor means. And then also what we did was that we generated a mock pricing page. This was done just in Google Slides. We threw it again to this online panel, and we just wanted to get an indication of what package would the customers choose. And again, we selected our target segment from that panel, and then we asked, like, which one of these would you select? And we got this kind of an, what you can see here on the bottom, that this is how the selection was divided, and this was looking pretty okay for us. So we were confident enough to go forward with it. And this is actually a screenshot from the current Xolo pricing page. I won't go into details in this one, but maybe here this is sort of a bridge to the next section I'm going into, that there's a lot of design decisions done in this this page, and I'll dive a little bit deeper in a couple of them.
Yeah, Mikko, I'm looking at the time, so just encouraging everybody to post Q&A. Carlos and myself will pick them up after the next section. So Mikko, let's hear, what are the tips to design the best type of page? That was really interesting. Thanks.
Yes. So in the next section, I'll show a couple of examples that are derived from behavioral economics, and then we'll look into pricing page design. And just a couple of words about behavioral economics. So this is a field of psychology that's basically focusing on cognitive biases or illusions. And the main background of this, that we're using a lot of intuition in making decisions. It's probably coming from when we were cavemen and we had to make decisions really fast, and that was a matter of life and death. but we are still, the brain is wired so that we make a lot of decisions really fast. And a lot of this theory is coming from Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who did this research in Princeton University in the 1970s. So it's already like 40, 50 years old, but a lot of this thinking has been derived and developed further. And actually Kahneman won the Nobel Prize even from this research. So I'll just show a couple of examples of these. So let's start with the representativeness heuristic. And here the main thing is that humans are built to auto-categorize. So we put things into categories whether we like it or not. And also we did a small survey for the companies that are in Vendep and Now the Capital portfolio. And we asked that, do you use this heuristic or not? And we got a result for this particular item that roughly half of the companies are using this. And here the main thing for pricing perspective is that you have to put your offering into the right category, in the mental category for the customers. And I'm using banking here now as an example because in Holvi we were struggling exactly with this kind of challenge that we were offering a banking service, and then customers, we had this kind of a prosumer customer segment, and all of them were saying that, hey, but my banking is free, so why are you charging money for it? So then you have to think about this kind of categorization and what kind of mental model you put your product in. And this is on the next slide, you can just see this is from the Holvi pricing page. So you can see that there's not much mention of, or actually any mention of banking. So it's talking about starting a new business or sidekicking on the top of 9 to 5. Starter is for you. The next one is Goldilocks principle. So Goldilocks is the fairy tale where the little girl goes to the house of 3 bears and takes a bowl of porridge which is too hot, and takes a bowl of porridge which is too cold, and then takes the middle porridge, and that's exactly right, and that's where the name is coming from. And here in the pricing page design is the idea is that the customers always choose the middle option. And the main idea is that the cheapest one feels that the customers can actually afford better. The most expensive one feels that they don't want to overpay. So the middle one is for them. And usually this middle one is also highlighted somehow in the pricing page design. It also feels like the most typical choice. And roughly 1/3 of the SaaS companies surveyed used this principle. And just as an example, so for example, this is from Google, so they are doing exactly the Goldilocks principle here. So the idea is to select the middle option. So next one, anchoring, which I mentioned also in the previous slides. And here the bias is that we a little bit overweigh the value of benchmarks. Roughly 40% of the surveyed companies use this. And how to use this in pricing is that you could show, for example, competitor price on the path to your pricing page, probably not directly in the pricing page, but somewhere on the path where sort of customers get the mental model that, okay, it can cost this much. Also, you can use it directly in a pricing page where you have the priciest option, which is used as an anchor. So it shows that, okay, it can cost this much. So here, in this case, the 10 euro option is, okay, it's pretty good. And just an example from the, I would say, the king of anchoring, which is Apple. So this is from one of their keynotes where they're showing a monitor. It's not an Apple monitor, it's a Sony monitor that costs $43,000. And they are obviously revealing after this their own monitor, which has exactly the same features and more, and it costs only $5,000. So this is a very classical example of anchoring. Then social proof. This was actually the most commonly used by the SaaS survey for the company. So social proof is basically showing that others are using it. And for us humans, especially when we're uncertain, we tend to look to others for answers. So things that you can have, the components you can have, for example, is this most popular tag is very commonly used in pricing page design. You could show testimonials from customers, or you can show, for example, industry-leading companies that are using the solution. And just a screenshot from Slack, for example, they're doing exactly this. So this is from their pricing page. And then loss aversion, which is very interesting bias as well. So here, the thinking is that people actually usually prefer avoiding losses to acquiring gains. So loss feels much worse than actually the gain. So, and this was not actually too commonly used by the SaaS companies surveyed. But here you can have this kind of an hypothetical example that you can have, for example, this kind of a menu where you pick different components for your package. Or you can actually decide for the customer, have the package ready made and they have to remove it. And because of loss aversion, you actually get highly priced package using this loss threat in this one. And the most common way of using loss aversion is when you downgrade a service. And this process and this page is something that usually you should spend a lot of time on and think about how this process works. It can be this kind of a page, it can be a phone call, it can be whatever. But here an example from Dropbox showing that all the things that you will lose now when you downgrade for this. So it will stop syncing, you won't be able to add any new files, and you can't restore any files anymore. So there's this loss aversion in use. So that was the last slide from me, but I would still say as the final word before we go into the questions that just do it. It might sound a little bit overwhelming sometimes, this pricing research and pricing design, but I would say that if you do the research in-house, it gives you priceless insights, not only for pricing, but everything else.
Excellent. I think, Mikko, if you flip one more forward, and I think Carlos will then start taking the first question. I'll try to open the panel here to get more, but please, post questions.
Yeah. So guys, we have several questions coming over. I'm gonna read the first one. So because for you, how many customers need to answer so you get enough data for the analysis?
Yeah. So there's actually good online tools also to measure the statistical significance. It depends how big is your customer base. So that's basically the main driver for that one. In our case, for the survey, we had some hundreds of answers, and for the interviews, there's not really an amount that you can say from the back of your head. So the idea is that you just have to get enough data, enough answers from the customers, and when you start to see recurring patterns, then you know that you have enough.
So how do you determine whether to publish live, prices live on the page versus just putting a, request demo or contact us for pricing?
Yeah, I think this depends on what kind of exactly what the price point is. So if you have the capabilities to do sales and you are actually able to take the phone calls in, then you have the possibility to always request a meeting. But this is just based on my experience. Usually having at least some kind of an indication of the price points on your website helps for the conversion.
Another question here. When to go for different plans, one for feature-based pricing, one for fully custom, or some other alternative?
So custom pricing, this is a topic that keeps coming up quite often. Let's start from a technical implementation. That's usually extremely hard to build. So depending on what kind of service you have, you actually have to start to support all sorts of different kind of add-ons and features that are on or off, and they are separately priced. And I would guess that at some point you actually reach the limit when it's too difficult to manage this kind of a pricing model. This is also, I think, bringing a lot of cognitive load for the customers. So they actually have to work for it, and they have to think very hard on what they need and what they don't need. And in many cases, at least on the companies I worked in, the customers usually don't even know when they're buying that what do they actually need. So this might be a difficult thing to do, but I would sort of try to get to a ready-made packages if you are able to, from the interviews, to identify the customer group, the buyer personas, and then you are able to craft just the right pricing for them. This usually is the most effective way, in my opinion.
Before I take the next question, we promised 45 minutes. I know it's the time now, so thanks for those who need to leave right now. But I think we'll go another 10 minutes here or until we have questions to pick up. So let's continue with the questions. Maybe I'll take this sounds interesting. I don't know, Mikko, if you have data, but you have the most popular, say you have that most popular label on that pricing where you want to really get people. Do you have data on how well this works, or how can you measure how much this impacts the choice of the customers actually in live pricing pages?
Yeah, so I do have actually data. So, and we were trying it out. We were doing A/B testing. So we put the highlight or the most popular tag to different pricing plans, and we were sort of trying out which works and which doesn't work. And there is definitely, it has effect, but it's not that significant. So I would say that we're talking about 1 to 2 percentage points that you can get an increase or decrease with this one. So, but I'm just talking, of course, about our products. There might be more effect in some other cases.
Okay, another one here is around what happens when you have a cost which is you have to estimate, for instance, a setup cost in addition to the license cost. What do you recommend? Would you expose a minimum and a maximum, or would you just highlight that there's a service to be estimated, and then, or do you say nothing at that point?
That's a hard question. I think it's always, good to give some kind of an estimate or some kind of a framework for the customer that they can exactly do this categorization in their head, that what kind of a product I'm talking about. Is it the premium, or what kind of product it is? So I would always, at least based on my experience, try to get some kind of a range visible for the customer. So that would be my thinking on it.
Just to answer somebody's recording question, yes, this is recorded and it's being recorded, so you'll get answers to these two. Mikko, still to your A/B testing and your pricing surveys, how did you select the customers? Was it random? Is there strict criteria? And did you also get people that weren't your customers into the survey?
Yeah, so actually this I forgot to say. For the willingness to pay, you can't obviously survey your existing customers. So there you have to get customers from the outside that fit your target segment. That this might be challenging in some cases. So, but for the interviews, we were using this kind of a heuristic that we were trying to get sort of the best and the worst kind of customers. And I think all customers are good, of course, but basically the ones that, for example, internally are causing more work or less work, and trying to get like different brackets of the customers into the interviews. So that way you can get as wide a picture as possible. And usually you can select these customers using whatever data system you have about your customers and try to get those customers from there. For the survey, we were using a bit similar approach. There you need more answers. So we were sending it to a much wider audience, and there was a little bit less of this selection happening. But yes, maybe the bottom line is that yes, we did select the customers.
Hey, how would you do the value-based pricing in the case where you are creating a new market? So you don't have customers yet, there are no customers available?
So yeah, I actually get this question quite a lot in developing new products also. So how do you actually figure out if it's worth something? And I think the only way is to work with prototypes. So you have to build some kind of a prototype of your offering and take it in front of the customer. And after that, using the prototype and talking to the customer, you can ask also these questions that how much would you be willing to pay for it? So what would be an affordable price? What would be an expensive price? What would be a prohibitively expensive price? And after you've done enough of these, again, hopefully you start to see some kind of patterns that this kind of a customer doesn't need that service that much. This kind of customer is willing to pay more for it. So I would say that I would personally at least build a prototype and go out with it. Maybe not on the streets at this time because there's the coronavirus, but you can do a lot online already.
So Mikko, the other end is having legacy products and then maybe refining a product that you really want to focus on, but you have then legacy customers as well. And you might have multiple pricing plans. What are your thoughts if you think about this? So should everybody be moved on a single pricing plan? How fast? What are the key risks? I know you thought about this.
Yes. And how would I put it? I've learned from the mistakes also multiple times regarding exactly this question. So if you would ask me now, I would migrate everyone to the new plans as fast as possible. And this is mainly an operational issue that comes up then later on. So usually also on the code base, you have to manage multiple price plans, and pricing in many cases affects many parts of your offering and systems. So having a lot of legacy plans in the system slows down everything. It also means that you have to manage in many cases, for example, FAQs for these legacy plans, and then for the new plans. There might be even different websites for the legacy plans, for the new plans. So to make your life easier, I would try to, if possible, migrate everyone as fast as possible to the new plans. And obviously, if you have a legacy product, then you have to make the hard choice that do you keep it running or what do you do with it? And if you plan to, for example, kill the product, I think pricing is the best way to do it also. So
I agree.
Yeah.
So the risk is big.
Mm-hmm.
We have still plenty of questions, but I think let's do maximum 4 minutes. So I think we have time for 3 or maximum 4 more.
Yeah, there's one question here around different countries. Okay, I think it's an interesting one. So it's asking directly to you, are you available in all countries? Is the pricing model the same in all countries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, like one topic I've been struggling with in multiple times, and yeah, it's like this Big Mac index. So what's the price of the Big Mac in different countries? So I think in the long run, you can't really avoid having country-based pricing, at least in the category I'm working in with the SMEs. And I think there's so much differences in different countries on how the price points are being valued. But that said, at the moment, our pricing is the same with Xolo in all the countries at the moment. But let's say it this way, that it might not be the case going forward. So, but that again adds complexity. So you actually have to then start to manage these geographically contained prices, and that requires different kind of thinking and systems.
So let's. There are several questions about free plans here. I think it's the most difficult question to post, but let's post it this way, because you don't have a free plan. So it would probably cannibalize something. Or how do you view a free plan? When would you have a free plan, or have you considered a free plan? Just a couple of thoughts about a free plan.
In general, I think freemium is a very good way of doing things if you are working with consumers or prosumers or even small companies. So I think freemium is very effective. So it sort of contributes, in my opinion, to this product-led growth. So it gives you the customers an opportunity to try out if they actually need it, and if you designed it very well, it also can provide some value and also sort of generate these growth loops for you through that. And if you have done the research properly and you have identified exactly the right kind of value drivers in the background, then all the customers that like your product are forced to actually go to the priced plans later on. So I see a lot of potential there. At the moment, yes, we don't have a free plan, but we've been discussing it also.
There's a question here also around pilots, which is different to the one we've just had, right? I mean, should we free? Should we charge for it? I just add to that. Should we have pilots at all?
Pilots, you mean like testing out the service?
Yeah, I guess he means, you know, the initial relationship with the customer, and then you renew, you convert directly into a subscription. You sometimes start with the pilot.
Yeah, I think it adds value. So in many cases, you get a better engagement, and if you actually are building the funnel so that you can identify early on from some indication on whether this will convert to a paid customer or not, depends of course on the product and what the indicators would be. But if you work on this, then you can actually start to put more effort to the customers that are more likely to convert. So you can fill in the top of the funnel fast and then put the effort on the customers that are likely to convert to a paying model. And then depending on what kind of resources you have, it might be phone calls or, I don't know, dedicated email or something like this. Then there's a lot of opportunities, I think, to actually sell your product even more through that.
So that brings us to a close. We didn't get through all questions. Big thanks, Mikko. Big thanks, Carles. Big thanks, everybody who attended. And big thanks to Timo and Theo for helping in the background as well. So any last words from Carles, you or Mikko?
Oh, Mikko, you've brought the interesting stuff today. So thanks a lot for a real-time experience.
Thank you very much. And I'll say that just go work on the pricing. It's a very interesting area.
Yeah, big thanks. And hopefully everybody got something to put into their business from this. And let's keep growing.